Welcome to the Finding Magic podcast, where we talk about structured intuition, creativity, and magic, as discussed in my book, Getting into the Flow. And we learn from my guest stories, which helps us broaden our view of reality and understand how magic is created and sensed, so that we can realize our true potential and create our lives as purposeful and powerful and from an inspired and joyful place. I'm Vincent, your host. Let's get into it. And so welcome to episode I.4. Today, I'll be interviewing Leah Foley and inviting her to share a story of magic showing up in her life. Now, Leah's a medical intuitive and healer coach who studied a wide range of holistic modalities and created her own styles of healing, her own form of medical intuition, the unraveling techniques, and intuitive health planning. And for over 10 years, she's been guided by intuition to help develop fresh ways to relate to our health, and especially loves coaching other healers. In her downtime, she cares for her pet birds, they're Facebook celebrities these days, and loves capoeira and swing dancing. Leah's going to tell us about a time when she magicked some money to pay for her safari holiday trip. So, Leah, tell me about your story, starting with, what was the background to it?
The background, so there was this safari trip that was offered in one of the courses. You know about it, we've met in that kind of work, right? There was a lot of resistance actually to doing that safari. Everyone was doing it, and I got it in, we talk about the heart vision, right? And we do work with the academy, but in the heart vision, I saw giraffes, and I was like, no, that's symbolic. That means something else. It was eating away for a few days, and I eventually went and did an intuitive technique, and I was like, it's coming through that my heart wants to go on this trip. The problem with that was that the trip was 10K plus flights, so it was a substantial amount of money, and that's how the story started. That's a general feel of the story. What happened next was I made a decision. I set an intention with that.
Yeah.
And, I said, okay.
10K is about 10,000 Australian dollars.
Yeah, it was 10K
about 7,000 US, and then flights to and from Australia are always expensive, but particularly to South Africa, because nobody really wants to go there. Not a lot of people go there. It's not a heavy route. It's not like going to Europe, where you've got A380 after A380 after A380 going backwards and forwards.
You obviously know your flights very well, but yes. So
well, I've been there a couple of times. Yeah,
you have. So I decided that I was going to pay the deposit and book the flights, but I wanted the rest of the trip. I didn't want to use my savings, so I made that very clear in my consciousness. And another thing that I was really clear that I forgot until I started thinking about the story for today was I decided that I wanted to learn deeper about magic through this experience. Not necessarily knowing what I was getting into, but it was nice and fun intention at the beginning. So I paid the deposit, right, and they claimed my space. The first payment was 2 months after that, and then the next payment was about 4 months after that. So we were moving. So the first payment and wasn't really too hard in terms of using magic. It wasn't what you would consider so magical, I think, but I knew I could do my tax and get quite a big return. So I guess it was just the most obvious thing to do. I hadn't done my tax yet, do my tax. I knew I would be getting close to that amount, if not that amount. I think I got $3,900. So, having to pay $100, but that was pretty cool for me. And the downside was that even though I got my tax done in December, the next payment was April. So I couldn't do that again. I had to wait till July, August, and it would be too late by then. So that I kind of just left it. I had this probably the best way to say it is I just kind of forgot about it and avoided the feelings of what on earth was I going to do. The main thing I recall is coming back into consciousness. I went to sleep, came back into consciousness, and it was basically close to April or early April. And I was coming back from work late at night, and I was at the fuel station pumping fuel. I looked at the fuel prices and I just started like getting really pissed off about how fuel increased, because basically on some unconscious level was this tension around the money that I had to somehow create. I had the savings, so that was always a backup, but to really apply magic isn't about reneging on the intention, especially if the intention had some truth to it. You understand that, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so I was freaking out. I was pissed off, freaking out, pumping fuel. And that tension, that intensity of that emotion probably felt like it went for a year, but it was only happening for a few minutes. And then in that moment, it was like an epiphany dropped in, and I thought kilometre reimbursement, which I'll explain about after this, but that was the solution for the second payment, or at least at that point in time, I didn't know that was the solution. That was a possible solution, but that popped in, not where I expected from.
As words sometimes do, they come from totally left field. Yeah. The words are very, very clear. And you know exactly what they mean, even if nobody else does. And
it probably didn't come through. Yeah. Like, I think you get more like word channel type things, right? I don't really get that, but more just a download, and I knew what that meant, and all the puzzle pieces all came together throughout the universe in that moment. Yeah. So anyway, so then the next day, obviously, kilometre reimbursement is something that your company offers. You're at a site office. The distance that you travel.
I'm going to stop you there. You kind of broke up a little, so I'm going to just ask you to repeat that. What was it? Kilometre reimbursement is something that who offers?
Okay, cool. Yeah, kilometre reimbursement is something my company offers.
Yeah.
And if you work at a site office, and the distance from your head office, wherever you're registered, to work, whatever that is, the distance is you get paid every time you travel to the site office. And if you put in those claims, there's a rate that you do. At that point, I wasn't getting that. And what had happened earlier in possibly January, February, was I was at the lunch table. It came up in conversation, and basically one of the managers found out I wasn't getting it and said, "You're an idiot." He didn't mean that in a bad way. It was basically, "You're an idiot for not claiming that, because that's a lot of money."
Yeah.
And at the time I was fuzzy with money, so I was like, "Oh, it just seems like too much hassle." But obviously his "you're an idiot" spurred me to take action, because I had written to my manager and wanted to change. I couldn't get the reimbursement without changing my head office, which was true, but I hadn't got, obviously there was a lot of things I hadn't tied up in my life, and that was all showing up. So I had written to him and never got a reply. So the next obvious action was to write to him and say, "Oh, back in February when I asked you this, what's happened?" And he wrote back going, "I thought that was organized." So somehow I didn't get the email. So that all happened. And when I was at the computer, I was sitting next to someone, and I said to her, I told her the story, and she was from the same company. So she pulled out the calculator and she said, "If you can backtrack to February from now, that's roughly," I can't remember the amount, 4.5K or 5.5K. I was like, that really opened my eyes, brought my attention. So I needed 5K for the second amount. So then the next obvious action then was to go down to the person who signs them off and say, "Can I backtrack back to February?" And so I went down, and he said yes immediately. And so I went back up, and I have work to do, but I was basically just printing out. I had to do weekly. I had to backtrack a couple of months and do all those. And I got him to sign it before he reneged on what he said.
Yeah.
I don't know. I was just like, they've actually changed the rules now, and now you can't go back more than a month now. They've changed it since, but at the time there was no rules with that. And yeah, basically got my money. What was amazing about that for me, which wasn't my intention, was that after that, that became a supplementary income. That became an extra bit of income for me. So apart from me paying for the trip, I actually gained extra money. And the 2 weeks that I was going on that safari, I was going to leave without pay because I'd used up all my leave. So that extra amount actually paid for the 2 weeks that I continued to get paid. I don't know, probably paid back my deposit and my flights eventually. But I think what it really gave me was, the amount that I was driving was a lot. That's why that amount was so much, because I was driving a lot. And that kilometer reimbursement is actually for my servicing of my car and the extra fuel. So I wasn't actually taking care of myself. And what this whole magical process and me learning about magic was also giving back to me in a longer sense, which there's all these benefits to magic that you don't see because you're too blinkered.
Right. So you see the obvious initial effect, the money lands with you, but you don't see what's happening down the track.
Yeah, you don't see the bigger picture.
Yeah. So perhaps you can just dig into that a little bit more and give me some examples. Yeah,
that's a good question. I think that the real deeper meaning around that is that when you're starting to work with magic or putting structures in place to create things, all the stuff comes up that is in a position for that. Because going on that safari was a bit of a splurge. It wasn't something that I would have done normally to give to myself. So in a way, the ways I wasn't taking care of my own money and myself through that was starting to come up in the surface, because everything, we kind of have this idea when you're doing law of attraction that you just imagine the check. I had a check on the bed of 10,000. I never got that. Was it 100,000? Sorry. I never got that 100,000 in the mail that they said. But what's not talked about is how all of you needs to come into alignment. And so all this, what do you call it, muck? What's your word for it? All this muck, all this, everything that's not in alignment will bubble up to the surface.
Yeah.
And if you can hold that end result and adjust everything back into alignment through random actions, through changes of perspective, I don't know, there's probably layers and layers of that. But if you can bring it onto alignment, then you're going to get that end result, right?
Yeah.
There was a lot that was not in alignment to me, just receiving 5K cash that I needed to sort out. That's probably it. Does that explain it? Is there maybe you want to add something?
Yeah, what I will do is, first of all, to highlight the fact that this wasn't any kind of regular safari, as we were talking about just before we started recording, but it was a safari with a component of training in structured intuition. And so there was something about that aspect of it that called you to go on the training. Would I be right in saying that?
Yeah, there's definitely, I mean, I still don't fully understand why I needed to go on that particular trip. Though I loved it. There was a lot of stuff that came up. But right after that trip, that's when I started my business, started working as a healer. And it's not like that idea just come in my mind. There were 3 years that I was trying to get my bum in gear to start the business. Starting a business isn't easy, especially when if you haven't done one before. So there was a lot of unconscious. So something must have happened, and I probably still don't fully understand it, but it doesn't matter because it all happened in a natural flow. And so, there was a component. It wasn't just the magic of seeing all the animals and the beauty of the area, but we did have that internal processing and the readings, the intuitive work that was shifting things as well on another level.
Yeah. But I guess what I'm getting at is that in your case, what you got was the continuation of the magic beyond what you originally wanted, which was get me off to safari and into that beautiful next phase of build the business. Kind of in the same way that, when I did the magic, I created this beautiful trip to Uluru, but beyond that, I've created the book, and there's a lot that's magical about that book. That the magic doesn't stop flowing once you kick it off.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
that's a good point. I haven't thought of it like that. I knew that all happened.
Yeah,
but I hadn't pieced it, or I hadn't thought of it quite like that before that yet. I definitely knew that I was continuing to benefit from it. It wasn't just I needed this result and I got that result, it's over. Like this continual benefit came and continued to be magical. I mean, obviously, one part of this is that I needed to be able to receive, which meant asking people when I needed it in the obvious actions. And then obviously getting that reimbursement afterwards, I needed to continue asking people, or to start the business, I still needed to take action. I mean, like, it's not as simple as I just started the business and the business flowed. There was a whole other story with that. But it was definitely, all the challenges have been worth it and magical, which is what I think you're coming to me.
Yeah. And you do get little bits of help along the way. And, one of our faults as people is that we don't believe magic really exists, or we've been brought up in that culture. And so we don't watch out for it and notice it when it happens. And so we forget it easily as well. We don't know. So, are there any other lessons that you picked up, I think, from this whole experience?
There's a few. I can't remember them right now. I can't remember. I mean, there's so many different. I think one of the key things, like if I knew that I was going to have that experience at the fuel station, I wouldn't have wanted to go through that, because it was quite internal. We talk about it, psychological tension, right? It was quite intense internally. Someone from the outside was looking at me pumping fuel. They couldn't see the steam coming out. I was like, quite intense, right? But I think you can't be in control of the process when you're working in magic. There are very obvious things that you need to do in that moment, but you don't get to know, I don't get that intuitive hit where I download the whole plan. You go get shitty at that fuel station, and then you got to go talk to this person, and then you got to go ask permission. There's no guarantee, which is what makes it magical in the first place. The fact that it's not guaranteed, that you don't fully know. The other thing is that the conditions, the fuel prices were increasing, expenses were increasing at that moment. Obviously, nothing increased to now. This was a 15-year ago story, but they were increasing. So the conditions were that money was getting tighter. The condition was that it was intense. People kind of think of creating, like if you create, you need to feel good. There is no condition. Like the first payment was really simple. I probably resisted doing the tax, but it wasn't that hard. And the second payment was more intense. But once the dam broke, I guess that's how the feeling is. It was intense, and then the dam broke, and then suddenly it was like follow that flow. But it's not the condition that determines whether it works out for you. It's more whether you take the cues that you need to take, also whether you can receive and let go when it is the time to do that. I think that's another key insight.
The ability to receive is really important, and the openness to receive as well. And a lot of us have been brought up with words like it's better to give than to receive, and we've kind of turned off this ability to receive, and we think perhaps it's just about money or something, or who buys the coffees today, or that sort of thing. But it's something that's more pervasive and across all of life, and there's other things that are out there to be received that we've also turned off as well. we have to learn to turn back on again. Yeah.
Yeah, this receiving can, I think I wrote something today about it on Facebook, but this feeling like we can look at this magic and this flow as if the universe is going to gift it to you, like some parent figure. It's like, oh, is dad going to hand out the money now, versus, you're co-creating. Everything's available to you. If you get really creative or open your mind creatively, there are lots of things available to you, but then does require you to be active. So people can think of receiving as passive, but there is an active component. You have to ask someone. Sometimes they don't get it. Like you want this from them, they don't get it. You ask them, then they may not give it to you, but you're in a state of receiving then. Like,
yeah.
Of course, you got to also receive it once they give it to you. That's a whole other thing.
And there's the whole thing about knowing how to ask for it. That exercise we call advanced communication.
Yeah, being direct.
To do that, being direct, being
clear what you want,
heart.
and
yeah, kind of
yeah,
the heart. Yeah,
I think the more simple the process or what you need to do is, the harder it can be. For some people overcomplicate. I know I do overcomplicate. It's got to be this, or can't be just as simple as that. Just ask this person. Got to make a big complex thing out of it.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I don't think there. I'm just looking at any. There's something here. Yeah, there was one. Obviously, I wrote these this morning, and most of it we've already talked about. There's two things. One of them is we talked about it's not guaranteed. And we guarantee for safety. We want these guarantees in life for a sense of safety, and it's not like we should have to have that intense moment at the fuel station to create everything. That's putting conditions on it all over again. Like, oh no, it's not this now, it has to be intense. It doesn't have to be anything. But then the need for guarantees all the time can deaden the soul, can deaden your creativity. But I can understand how we all want to be safe when we're in that perspective or that orientation, when we're feeling unsafe, that we want that. But there's so much more magic in the non-guaranteeing. That doesn't mean walking across the street like on a highway and going, am I going to be alive now? That's probably that's not really receiving the joy of life.
Yeah, but I totally get the idea of guarantees and being able to choose something that's shown to you in the heart vision that's kind of outside, possibly outside of what you believe is immediately possible for you. You don't know the people, you don't have the money, the conditions in your life aren't right for you to receive that. And and there's no guarantee that you will, but we choose it anyway and we work towards that.
Yeah, and that's when you're right, like you actually become more open to receive because you're taking those steps that are outside of that comfort or that belief system, and therefore all the magic is possible. That magic in ways that, imagine if you knew. I don't know why people want to have their reading done for the rest of their life. I don't want to know what my life's going to be and it's guaranteed. It's really boring. It's the movies that you watch where you're not quite sure what's going to happen. You want to find out what happens. That's when you bring in that wonder, that magic. You want more involvement in energy, that sort of stuff. So that was that one. And the other one was putting your foot down. So, choosing, deciding on something. So I decided I wanted to learn about magic. I decided that these were the limits. I didn't want to use my savings. It's not the only story. I've had that with when I created my car. I didn't want to use my savings with my new car, but I was pretty tight. I think I was 8K in debt at the time through some marketing thing that I did. And so it was quite a tight condition, but it's a very similar story, and I probably won't go into the details. It's a very similar what happened. And it comes back to receiving. It comes back to taking the next step, having a a vision that you don't know how it's going to happen.
Mhm.
But I had a line. I didn't want to use these savings. So putting my foot down on that. And it's kind of like someone explained to me like a haiku, because I know you're doing haikus. These beautiful creativity comes through the constraint of the 575 syllables.
Yeah.
It's like you got to find really creative ways to pull out a story within a 575 syllable, which, you know, can be, I think there used to be a competition as well back in the day where the writers could only use one sentence to tell a story. And it's like that constraint forces out, if you're in the right orientation, obviously, this creativity that you probably wouldn't do if you were like, oh, I've got all the money. Like if I had, I don't know, millions of dollars, I wouldn't have done this whole process. I would have just used the money to pay for the small 10K safari at the time. So yeah, it's that putting the line. There's something about, I probably don't have it exactly clear, but that seems to be a key component as well, because if you don't have a line, then you're going to move out of those lines. It's also going to force out this creativity that's available sitting within you.
Yeah. So deciding on the constraints that you're going to live with and the boundaries. Yeah.
Obviously, there has to be some sense that it's true for you. Like it's not just, but it's also can be a little bit of a challenge as well. Like I want to create this, but I don't want to do that because, you know, that constraint brings out that magic as well in some way. I don't know if you have an example. I have some, but those are the main ones where you need to create some type of fund. That's usually where I've used it.
Right. I don't have anything like that at the moment. That's probably something I should look at doing for myself in the near future.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to taking care of yourself as well.
Yeah.
It's like sometimes I find with my business, if I've got all my spare time, then I will probably not do things as efficiently because I've got all the spare time. Whereas I go, no, this day is a non-work day, or this day is for this. That's carved out. That creates a boundary, and then I actually become more efficient in what I have to do. And I think that's a different way of looking at the same thing.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And you know, it's being borne out in real life. I mean, there are companies that are getting people to work 4 days a week and finding that their people are just as productive. There are companies that are saying, you know, you're going to work, instead of working, you know, 9 to 5, you're going to work 8 till 2, shorter working day. After that, you've got the rest of the day off, and they tend not to lose out because, you know, you're taking the cream of the productive time, using that, getting the most out of it, and the rest is recuperation time, and it's kind of makes you more productive day after day after day.
Yeah, I found that. Like I work only 3 days a week in that company now, and I started off 5, went down to 4. It was a bit of a pay cut, but now the pay's increased to be equivalent or more. But I probably couldn't cut down to 2. So there is a line to where you do draw a line. I probably couldn't cut down to 2 days a week, 1 day, and still create the results. But with 3 days, it's just enough for me. I can spread it out and I can create efficiency. So I could make calls, wait the week, and I'm not wasting time in the meantime. So yeah, it's a good point. It's a very interesting discussion itself.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much. I think we've covered everything you wanted to cover. So I'll ask you one last question, which is, if anybody's watching this or listening to it, how can they stay connected to you?
Yeah, so you can check me out on invokespirit.com. So that's my company name, Invoke Spirit. There's various services, there's a blog and things like that. And there are definitely lots of freebies a lot of my work is intuitive health or intuitive coaching with healers. So that's my focus. And I'm looking at ways that bringing intuition and structured approaches and insights into health so that it's more enjoyable for people. And also getting the healing. Healing in itself can be a magical experience, but I think it's just because we don't understand. It's probably not as magical as it seems. It's just the body's magical in itself because it's keeping us alive, right? But in terms of what's available to us, it's mainly just because we can't see. So a lot of my work is using intuition to bring that awareness in. Thanks, Vincent. That was great. Thank you for the time.
Yeah.
And this discussion, it's been great.
And like all great creations, it's been great in its own right as a discussion of a story of magic, even without the whole framework of the podcast. But I will take a moment or two just to wrap this up. If you'd like to learn more about Leah and her work and you missed the link, or you'd like to learn more about me and my work and finding magic, because there's only so much we can cover in this episode, please head on over to my website, vincentgmelling.com, where you'll see a podcast button at the top, and that'll take you to a link where you can access the full list of podcast episodes. And for Leah's interview, that will include a link to all the resources that Leah shared with me. That page also has a full list of the episodes, like I said, the platforms where you can get them, and a link for you to join discussions of the episodes. And also, if you'd love to share your story of magic on the podcast, I'd love to hear, and there's a link for that too. On the website, there's another button for you to get the book. And if you're listening to this before April 2024, when it's going to be published, there's a special early bird discount offer. Finally, there's a button for you to engage with me through the coaching and the trainings I run. So here's the website again, vincentgmelling.com. Thanks to all of you. Thanks to the local birds and the builders, and to Leah's birds, who've kept very, very quiet for us today. And we'll catch you in the next episode.